I never believed in superstitions. I grew up thinking all those stories about haunted houses, strange rules, or rural warnings were nothing more than fairy tales meant to scare the weak-minded. But what I lived inside that cabin, what I saw with my own eyes, changed everything. I remember the road perfectly. A narrow path cutting through the woods, the trees so tall they swallowed the moonlight. Fog slithered between the trunks like it was trying to hide something, and then I saw it. A cabin, sunken in shadows, the wood dark and damp as if it hadn't been touched in years. At first glance, it looked abandoned, but there was one detail that made my skin crawl the second I noticed it. On the front door, nailed with a rusted spike, hung a yellowed piece of paper. Rules, written in shaky, desperate handwriting. 1. Never close the curtains at night. 2. Never open the door if someone knocks after midnight. 3. Never, under any circumstances, step outside if you hear your name. I laughed nervously, convincing myself it was some kind of joke. Maybe the last owner was a paranoid old hermit. But something about the words, they didn't read like warnings. They read like pleas. Inside, the air was thick with rot and damp wood. Every step I took made the floor groan like the cabin itself was protesting my presence. I dropped my bag in a small bedroom, its single window staring straight into the endless forest. The moon poured in through the glass, cold and silver, bathing everything in a pale glow. That first night was when it started. I couldn't sleep. The silence was unbearable, pressing down on me like a weight. No insects, no owls, no distant rustle of leaves, nothing, just the sound of my own breathing. And then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 heavy raps against the door, so loud they echoed in my chest. My body locked up, every nerve screaming at me to stay still. Slowly, the words on the paper burned into my memory. Never open the door if someone knocks after midnight. I looked at my watch, 12:03. Whoever was out there wasn't supposed to be. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it began. The silence returned, thicker than before. My mind scrambled for explanations, maybe an animal, the wind, my imagination. But when I gathered the courage to glance through the window, my blood ran cold. Just beyond the tree line, a figure stood watching me, motionless, silent. Its eyes glowed, 2 burning embers in the dark. I didn't sleep a second that night, and deep down, I knew I had made a terrible mistake coming here. The next day, I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Sleep deprivation, maybe, or the mind playing tricks in the dark. But I couldn't shake the image of those glowing eyes watching me from the tree line. By morning, the paper on the door was gone, torn away. Not a scrap remained. That should have been a relief, but instead it left me unsettled. Who had removed it? I told myself I would stay just one more night. Then I'd pack my things and leave. But as the sun sank, unease crawled beneath my skin. The shadows inside the cabin stretched unnaturally long, reaching for me even as I tried to light a fire. The air carried a faint odor, something metallic and sharp, like rust or blood. I sat in the small kitchen, staring at the walls, when I heard it. A voice. It came from outside, muffled, distorted by the woods. At first I couldn't make out the words. Then, with horrifying clarity, I realized what it was saying. It was my name, over and over again, drawn out like a chant. Daniel. Daniel. Every hair on my body stood on end. The third rule thundered in my head. Never, under any circumstances, step outside if you hear your name. I pressed my hands over my ears, desperate to drown it out, but the voice grew louder, closer. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even aggressive. It was worse. It sounded pleading, begging, like someone I loved was outside, waiting for me to help. At one point, I could swear it was my mother's voice, then my best friend's, then my own. I stumbled back into the bedroom, my pulse hammering. I sat on the bed and forced myself to stare at the window. The rule said never to close the curtains, and I wasn't going to risk breaking it. The forest was silent again. For a while, I thought maybe it had ended, but then something moved. A shadow detached itself from the tree line. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs too long, its neck bent at a grotesque angle as if it had been broken. It moved with an unnatural slowness, each step deliberate enough to draw out the horror of its approach. And those eyes, the same burning eyes I had seen the night before. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My body was frozen, trapped in that dreadful gaze. Then, the knocking began again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it wasn't just the door. The walls shook, The windows rattled, as if the entire cabin was surrounded, struck from all sides. The sound was maddening. Too many fists, too many hands. I clamped my hands over my mouth to keep from screaming. The air turned ice cold, my breath fogging in the moonlight streaming through the glass. And then, from the shadows outside my window, the thing spoke, in a voice that was almost mine. "Daniel, open the door." I don't know how I survived that second night. When the knocking finally stopped, when the voice faded into the trees, I just sat there, paralyzed, shaking, drenched in cold sweat, until the first trace of dawn bled into the forest. I should have left. I should have run. But something inside me knew it wouldn't let me. Not anymore. That morning, I tried to pack my things, but every step felt heavy, like I was moving through water. My body obeyed me sluggishly, as if the cabin itself was sapping my will. The forest outside didn't look like the same forest anymore. The trees seemed closer, denser, like the path I came from no longer existed. And then I noticed something new: scratches. On the inside of the door, long, deep grooves etched into the wood, as if someone had clawed at it, desperate to get out. By the time night fell, I realized I was trapped. The silence returned, thick as ever, pressing in on me like a physical force. My heart pounded with every tick of the clock, waiting, dreading what would come next. It didn't make me wait long. The voice came first, louder than before. My name again, drawn out with mocking sweetness. But this time it wasn't outside. It was inside the cabin. I spun around, searching every corner, but the sound came from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the ceiling, from beneath the floorboards. The cabin whispered with my own voice. "Daniel, Daniel." And then the door slammed open. I hadn't touched it. I swear I hadn't. The rule said never to open it, but it opened on its own, groaning on rusted hinges, revealing the forest beyond. Mist poured in, curling along the floor like fingers, and standing there in the doorway was me, or something wearing my shape. It had my face, my posture, my clothes. But the eyes, those burning eyes, betrayed it. It smiled, wide and unnatural, and lifted a hand in greeting. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just sat on the floor as it stepped inside, the door slamming shut behind it. It crouched down, face inches from mine, and whispered with my own voice, "You broke the rules." The next thing I remember is darkness, a suffocating blackness that felt endless. When I woke, it was morning. The cabin was empty. The door was closed. No scratches, no paper, no sign that anything had ever happened. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But when I looked in the cracked mirror above the sink, my heart stopped. My reflection smiled at me, and I wasn't smiling back.